Why on earth in 2024 would you buy a Lumix S5? This is why. So in 2024, this is why you're going to buy yourself a Lumix S5. I got some of the specs up on my trusty phone here. Let's go through them. So you've got a dual SD card slot, so you can back up all your photos, all your videos, or you can direct photos to one, videos to another, which in the professional world, having a backup is a must in case the files get corrupted or they go out the window. L-mount. A very adaptable mounting range for your cameras. You've got all your Leicas, all the other Panasonic, so the S ranges, which are your pro premium glass lenses, and there's plenty of third-party lens companies now which are making L-mount lenses. Full frame camera, which if that is the aesthetic look you were going for, then the S5 will tick that box. If you're not bothered by having like a micro four thirds or a small frame sensor, then you could also go for that as well. So it's got 14 stops, dynamic range when you're shooting in Vlog, 24 megapixel photo, 6K, 4K photo options, ability to record 4K internally, and to be honest, the list goes on and on, but we are not a spec channel. That was just a brief overview into a little insight of what this camera is capable of, which is greatness. Now, when this camera was released, it had one main competitor, and I feel like the S5 kind of lived in its competitor's shadow, but it really shouldn't have, because the margins are very fine between the two cameras, and that other camera is the Sony A7 Mark III. Now, they're both released at a very similar time in the same year, and when you put them next to each other, the specifications are very similar. These two cameras were the two which I was on the fence of which one I was going to purchase when purchasing my new camera. It must have been about 6 months before I then just made the decision that we're going with the S5. I've watched countless amounts of videos on YouTube trying to figure out which one was for me, and I've been a Panasonic and a Sony shooter in the past, so I know both picture profiles, picture qualities and ecosystems very well. I've had the S5 for just over a month now, and this is why I think it still holds itself in 2024. Within that 6-month period, the prices of both the cameras would jump in. Some websites would have the A7 III for slightly cheaper. Other websites would have the Lumix for slightly cheaper, then they both went down to the same amount, and then I really didn't know what to do, and then it got closer to the time that I had to shoot the wedding, and I was like, I need to purchase this camera, I'm going on holiday, I need it to arrive before I go so that I can get used to the camera, get fully set up on it. The Lumix S5 was still at that same price point that it had been at for a little while, whereas the A7 Mark III had jumped back up in price. That did have a little bit of persuasion on which way I swayed with my purchase, but then also I needed a flippy tilty screen rather than just a tilty one. No, I'm joking. That wasn't really a big part, but now that I've got it, I do actually use it more than I thought. So now I can just look at the screen whenever I need to see if I'm in focus, if I'm in center of the screen or not, rather than having to set up a monitor or another thing. Now in the future, it doesn't mean I'm not going to get a monitor, it just means for now that actually worked out to be a good addition to the purchase. So it wasn't a reason I bought it, but I'm rather enjoying that. So at the time, a big question that was on my mind of which one to go for was lenses. I was like, I already have some Sony lenses, however they are APS-C lenses, so I could use them on the A7 III, but I'd only be able to use the camera in APS-C mode, which led to my decision to go in with Lumix, because I was like, I'm gonna have to get new lenses anyway, so it doesn't really matter with which brand I go with, because yes, I could use the APS-C lenses, but I want to be able to use a camera's full ability. So that if that means I can't use the full frame, I can only use half the picture profiles and half the picture settings, I don't want that necessarily. Like, I don't have to buy a camera and then buy more lenses because I can only use half the lenses, when I can switch ecosystems and just start building into that and investing into that anyway. And the S5 was $999 for the S5 and a 20 to 60mm lens, whereas the Sony was, I think, 1,000 and something for the body alone. So I was like, that to me is a no-brainer. I'm getting the lens, I don't have to invest in the lens, and yeah, like, for me, money's like that. It has to make sense. I can't just purchase something without it making sense. It needs to make sense in my brain and financially, and needs to be justifiable. So now that's enough on why on earth I chose to go Panasonic over Sony. Let's get into the S5 and what I love about this camera. The main big thing I like about the S5 is the picture profiles and the colors that it produces. A lot of the time when I take in either the raw footage of the videos or the raw photos into editing, I'm not having to manipulate a lot of the photos too much, and I am adding a bit of saturation to a lot of it and changing that color profile ever so slightly, just to enrich the images and videos as much as I can. But I love the way that, like, the greens, the oranges, the contrast in the colors comes out from the S5, and that was a big reason why I like Lumix. I like those, like, bold colors which can be manipulated even further and be adjusted even further in post. Another reason is the flippy screen. I've mentioned it once, I won't go into too much detail about it, but it has actually turned out to be really useful. Another reason to why I like the S5 is the L mount. Again, I've touched on it briefly before, but it's a much more affordable line of lenses. Now, you can spend a silly amount of money on your prime lenses, on your Lumix systems, but for more of your, like, entry open level lenses, they're a lot more affordable than potentially going down the E mount, or I think the FE mount. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'll put it on screen if I'm wrong. But yeah, like, Sony lenses, they're great, they're just expensive. Same with Canon. If I was to go down the Canon route, like, I would have to sell a kidney to be able to afford them, basically. I love how simple the menu system is. Like, whatever you need to look for, you can just go in and find it. You don't need a PhD to figure out all the cryptic messages of where certain settings are hidden or where other things might be found. So if I wanted to change from shooting in a raw image to just a standard, I just go in, change it, straightforward, in and out, 30 seconds, I'm back to shooting. Whereas other systems that I've looked at and I've tried, I'm still trying to figure out how to change that setting, and it's been years, so yeah. Now, after using the S5 for just over a month, there are a couple of things that aren't like deal breakers, but I am running into, and they are just like little annoyances in using the camera. The first one, I knew about this, and I just knew it wasn't going to be an issue, but it was just going to be a factor to getting the camera. That is the autofocus. Lumix isn't renowned for being the best autofocus, and I know the S5 II and S5 IIX, they do have improvements upon that autofocus and a few other systems in place, whereas the S5 doesn't quite have that, but it's just something you just have to get used to. Like, sometimes it will struggle picking up faces if there's too much going on. If the lighting is quite dim as well, it struggles a little bit to find that focus. But again, that could also be down to user error as well, and errors on my behalf, which I will get used to learning this camera and how it reacts over time. The second little flaw I've found with the camera, when capturing bursts of images, I know that drives a lot of people nuts, capturing bursts of images, but sometimes you just have to hold that shutter down and then follow the subject along. It's not the cleanest, it's not the sharpest, but again, I knew that when purchasing the camera, and it's just something I'm now going to have to learn and adapt to using the camera. So it might mean manually changing that shutter speed even further and going into depths that I wouldn't necessarily go to with other brands or with other cameras, to allow me to get that cleaner image if a subject is moving. Past few shoots, I've probably not had it set up optimally so I could push it a little bit further, and that will probably resolve my issues. But again, I'll just have to go out into the field and test that with the camera. Overall though, I don't have many complaints, and this camera can 100% hold its own in 2024. Now, we've got cameras with specs which don't blow this one out the water, but they do make it look like a child. For a lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment, I don't need all these extra bits. Like, they are just like, wow, look at me. For social media, it can only be posted, videos can only be posted in full HD. So you can downsample 4K, you can downsample 6K or 8K, but it's a bit overkill. And I don't think my poor Mac would be able to handle 8K or 6K. It's on its last legs, nearly. This camera fills my needs for now. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to stick with this forever. In the long run, I will look to upgrade, I will look to progress on, but I will only do that when my business and my needs are needing me to move on, and I can no longer perform to my optimum ability with the settings and with the setup that I have. So that is my review and my reasons to why I shoot on the Panasonic S5 in 2024. Let me know your thoughts on the S5. Do you have one? Are you looking to get one? Because personally, I think it is a bargain at the price point that it is at now, and it is an overall great camera for a beginner, for a intermediate, or a professional photographer. So I'll leave a link below to Wex Photos where I got mine. It's not an affiliation, it's not anything, it's just you can get it. It's sitting at the same price of when I purchased it, which I think is another great one. So yeah, until next time, peace out, go out, capture some images and enjoy yourself whilst you do it. Till the next video, see you soon.